Behold the abomination. Yes, I tried to have a really good look at Elementary OS 8, and after several hours of wasting time, I still cannot get it installed on real hardware. Now, I can get it installed in a virtual machine, so we'll have a brief look at some of the things we notice in a virtual machine, but I do want to have a look at the release notes documentation. I'm going to talk about the issues with the installation. We will walk through and I'll provide a little bit of commentary on the release notes, and then we'll have a look, if we need to, at the actual distribution itself. Thanks for checking out this video by Switch2Linux, where we talk about Linux and open source software and privacy and things like that. If you like this type of content, please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. And today we do want to talk about Elementary OS, and this is the one that I wanted to do on real hardware. I've been critical of it over the years, having nothing to do with anybody involved in the project, simply due to the fact that on a technical level, the project is just not very good. And while they're making some attempts to provide security elements and even accessibility elements and things like that, ultimately, in this latest version, I actually think that they have failed even worse than in the past, which is totally shocking to me. Now, I say this because I want to give it a try to install it. And as I said, I did want to do it on real hardware to get away from anybody sitting here saying, well, you're just doing it on a virtual machine. Well, first and foremost, that argument is silly nonsense because most of this world runs on virtual machines. Curiously, I can get this one to run on virtual machines. I just can't get it to run on real hardware. So let me tell you what I tried to do to get Elementary OS 8 to work. First, of course, like most distributions, I install them utilizing a simple Ventoy application. If you're unfamiliar with Ventoy, you can have a look at my video about that particular package. Ventoy is a software that you install onto a USB drive, and it opens up all the rest of the drive as just storage space. You can drop a Linux distribution or actually any operating system distribution in there. And when you do that, you can boot off of any distribution that is on that drive. It allows you to very simply download the distribution, move it onto that drive, and boot it without having to rewrite the drive for a new ISO. And so that's how I usually run my installs. And so utilizing my Ventoy, I go to my computer, which is a Ryzen 5 with a AMD graphics card, and I kicked out my main hard drive through my IC dock, and I installed my SSD. M2 SSD, same one I do most of my Linux distribution testings on real hardware. And it installed the first time. I'm like, great, let's reboot the system. And I walked through the very first time. I was able to get through, set up the original system user, and then when it reboots to log you in, I had a screen without a login capabilities at all. And I tried everything I possibly could to get that thing to work. I'm like, well, something went goofy. Let's go to reinstall. It will not reinstall again. There is something Elementary OS installer is doing that once it's installed onto a disk, you just can't get it to reinstall onto the disk without some hefty work. And I'm talking, I took the drive out, I formatted the drive on a completely different distribution. I did everything I possibly could, get the thing in there. It would not install again until I installed something else on it. I thought, is my drive messed up? So I installed Fedora on it. Worked just fine. I installed Linux Mint on it. Worked just fine. I installed Elementary OS on it, and now it fails to install. It won't get past, and it's something having to do with the logical volume management, the LVM, and you can't, in the installer, which is a really nice installer, I like how simple it is, but we don't have the option to disable logical volume management, and there's something about the logical volume management on that installer that is completely messing itself up sometimes, and I have not found a way to get around it. So I did try my second SSD because I have a couple of these SSDs laying around. Well, that did the exact same thing. It just wouldn't install. Well, let's try it out on spinning Rust. Okay, same exact problem. It would not install that spinning Rust successfully was running Fedora before. It was running LMDE6, and then it failed to install elementary OS. So I have a third hard drive that is completely messed up right now. I'm like, is it possibly because it's Ventoy? So I switched over and I actually burnt it onto just a regular hard drive all by itself, the way you burn an ISO, and plug that in, and I get the exact same results. And yes, by the way, I did verify my download. It is not an issue of the dry, there's a problem with my download. I went in, I did the SHA 256 sum, and I verified the distribution. So effectively, I have a circumstance where every time I was able to successfully get it installed 3 times. The first time, it would not allow me to log in. I was literally showed this login prompt with no ability to log in. It was weird. Every other time, I simply got into a black screen. It would boot, it would say it's booting, and then I was staring at a black screen. And then I also took the same hard drive and I tried booting it not just on that Ryzen machine, I took it over to an Intel machine. I ran into a similar, not the exact issue, but I ran into an issue on the latest release of Solus where there's something in the video card that would not allow video to be played. Taking the exact same build out, running it in my Intel Core i5 processor, video played just fine. Definitely an issue with the hardware. In this case here, every computer I tried 3 different computers, 2 Ryzens, 1 Intel computer, nothing would able to boot that. So I have attempted to install. I actually wasted 5 hours trying to get a workable distribution of elementary OS 8 installed, and I was completely unsuccessful. It was able to successfully be installed on VirtualBox. However, VirtualBox was plagued with a lot of graphic and display issues, constant flickering, fluttering. It was totally unusable. So I went with GNOME boxes, where on GNOME boxes, I actually got a really good experience. So all of the video you will see of elementary OS 8 here is GNOME boxes. And so now, have they addressed some of the issues I have mentioned in the past? They did. Unfortunately, they did go a little bit too far on a few of those. We'll get into that in a bit here, but I do want to have a look at their release notes first. So the elementary OS 8 is out, and they want to focus on 3 basic things. Number 1 is secure session that ensures applications respect your privacy by requiring your consent. Okay, so they are accomplishing this by the Wayland session. Effectively, this is like every other distribution. We're installing X. You can run it on X. You can run it on Wayland. Ubuntu defaults to Wayland. You can go back to X. Linux Mint defaults to X. They have an experimental Wayland right now. Fedora, I think, has dropped X, doing pure Wayland. Elementary OS just wants to be cute. They're not sitting here saying, hey, you can do X, you can do Wayland. No, they have on their login screen, it says classic session, secure session. The difference, it is simply Wayland versus X. Now, understanding the reason this works, I'm going back to actually an article from 6 years ago, a question on information security, Stack Exchange. There's a question, do any non-GNU Linux display managers provide the same isolation as Wayland? And the explanation getting in here is really well worth the read if you want to get a firmer understand. They have Windows, we have the Linux with X, they have Linux with Wayland, and they have the mobile operating systems. Effectively, this kind of explains what elementary OS is trying to get at. The X server, once you are logged into the session, so the X server assumes that a secure person who's supposed to be there has gotten into the system. Therefore, everything that person can do in that system should be authorized. This is kind of like, let's just kind of say like it's a house. There's a secure front door. Once the authorized person utilizes the key to get into the house, they can now access everything within that house. Now, let's assume that you have maybe a multi-family dwelling that uses one key to get in. So this is kind of how Wayland works. You have one key to get into the front door, and then you have, let's say, 4 different apartment complexes in there. only the person with the key to apartment A can access apartment A, but once they get in there, they can access the whole of apartment A. So X assumes it's a full house. Whoever accesses the whole thing can see everything. Wayland compartmentalizes itself a little bit more than that. There is a challenge with that, and that is from a blog post earlier this year from Zoran. The big problem that they mention out here is the big problem with Wayland is it violates the fundamental Linux user space rule of don't break the user space, and Wayland does. Now, is it better or is it worse? It kind of depends. If you're using a lot of questionable software applications, or you're doing things like Facebook or stuff on big social media that collect a lot of data, yes, it's easier for things to escape your Firefox browser or whatever browser you're using and fiddle around and figure out other things you're doing on X, assuming that the browser is insecure. Generally, they're not allowing things to do. And so Wayland allows for better containerization. So it is a decent idea from the standpoint of security. The challenge with FOSS is we tend to look at installing the applications are all trusted applications. I take, for example, my phone. Graphene OS does a wonderful job of isolating everything out inside of your system, but I don't install any questionable applications on my phone, so it's sort of a moot point. Okay, if I have to install a potential insecure application, it does a good job of isolating things, and that's kind of what we're getting at. So this ultimately is a good idea. This is what enables you to have, like Ubuntu has and Fedora has, GNOME basically has, since they've been focusing so much on Wayland, the ability to have an apps panel where you can granularly control permissions inside of your system. It can access your home folder, but not your system folder. It can access the internet or not access the internet. You can set your applications to not access the internet in any Wayland type thing. Well, they're basically saying the secure session, and this is really what it's getting down to, and they're kind of talking in here about how you get to this, and I'll kind of show you what this looks like here. What it basically looks like is when you go into your login screen, you go in, and instead of saying I want X versus I want Wayland, you choose classic or secure session. It's kind of nonsense, really. But that's kind of what they're doing. It'd be better if they use the same language as everybody else, is what the point is. Now, they do have a brand new doc because they had to rewrite the doc for the security permissions. And then, of course, the last one is empowering our diverse community through inclusive design. I think inclusive design is actually the wrong word there. I think, reading through the blog post, what they mean is accessible design. There's a difference. Of course, inclusivity means a different word than accessibility. And when you're getting into the legal definitions, inclusivity tends to mean your like DEI type approaches, diversity, equity, and inclusivity. It deals with not worrying about what, or actually inclusivity generally would mean that we are trying to equally represent every group. Accessibility means a person who has some form of handicap can still access the system. Reading the blog post, I didn't see anything in here that actually dealt with inclusivity. I saw things that dealt with accessibility, which are two completely different terms. But we'll go ahead and get into that in a moment. So what they did with the secure session. Now, the X session behaves like any other Linux system. Everything can access everything else, no problems. When you go and choose the Wayland session, this is where their separation and their secure session powered by Wayland brings itself in. So you're basically going to have a system which gives you all these constant pop-ups. This, by the way, is effectively the same thing Ubuntu is working on with their secure system, which does effectively the same thing. When that is turned on, this is the new Ubuntu feature. I think we talked about it in one or two videos in the past. When it's turned on, every app that tries to do everything across the Windows session asks for your permission first. So Elementary looks like probably the second distribution attempting to implement some type of security protocols. Yes, this is a good thing. So Elementary is actually taking a charge on this particular approach. So for that reason, when you do something here, you'll get, in this case, allow a, I'm not sure what that application is, demo to take screenshots. Yes, you can allow it to take screenshots or deny it. Do you want to allow this to set backgrounds? Yes or no? And so this is actually good, and I tested that out briefly with LibreOffice. When I boot up LibreOffice and I close it, it says, hey, do you want this application to be able to run in the background or not? And so in this case, all it did is really added an extraordinarily annoying thing to the panel that I couldn't get rid of. Maybe it's there. Maybe it's not. I don't know. We'll see when we boot the VM back on. But overall, it does give us a little bit of extra security by constantly probing you into asking different permissions. This boils down when you get into your apps screen, you can choose which type of activity the thing's allowed to have. Is it allowed to get on the internet or not? I ran into one of these on Graphene, because Graphene has this isolation protocol, and there is the Anki flashcard software I have done a video on in the past for Android. It requires network access, which I don't like. So in Graphene, I turned it off and the app just was not working. I'm like, what in the world is going on? Well, it turns out you have to provide the app to have network access. So I'm rethinking that one right now. But anyway, you have the ability to do that. Of course, this here has extra options for location, background, things like that. And so they do have the updates. Now, the applications, this is something that has been an issue for me in the past. And in the past, they have said, here's our curated content, and everything that wasn't curated content gave you this really scary warning. And I have called this out several times. They did listen to people and they changed this around. So now they'll have a badge that says this is for elementary OS, and everything else just allows to install. In my opinion, they went too far, because Flatpak, they integrate FlatHub directly into the App Center store. Flatpak, and FlatHub, I should say, has actually created a system by which we can do some security checks. Is it verified or unverified? Like that system or not, that's what we have in Flatpaks. It will not give us any notice of unverified Flatpaks, except a very small line of text that is right in line with the description. I actually looked at the thing 5 times before I saw it. So that should certainly be a lot bigger if it's an unverified FlatHub application. Because we have such metadata, it should take advantage of such things. But we don't get those scary warnings where we're installing some trusted software like GIMP or LibreOffice. So for that reason, they've actually gone in a good direction. I just wish they'd give us a little bit better notification when it comes to installing an unverified FlatHub application. And so that's what they're doing. Also, their updates. There is a little bit of an odd thing here. Inside of the system updates, then we have in their operating system, you can get the updates here. But if you have system updates, the store will still tell you there's updates, but when you click the update button, it tells you there's no updates available, because they have isolated system updates from application updates, but system updates still reports an update is there inside of the software store. Yes. They do have a separate button for firmware and driver updates, so that's really good. And I do actually like this degree of isolation that they're doing. It is very good. Now, I kind of like the way Linux Mint does it, where everything is unified a little bit better. However, this makes a lot of sense. The only thing I wish that they would have fixed is to make sure that if there's no app updates, the software store should not tell you there's updates unless it's going to redirect you back to this page to do them, which currently it does not, at least not that I have seen. And of course, we didn't mention it here, so I'll mention it here. Debs still has no support to simply click them and install them in a GUI application. I did successfully install the zoom.deb application. Zoom does appear to work. However, since doing that, it's throwing me a perpetual warning inside of the software center that there is an app that needs updated and cannot be updated. Outside of getting rid of the application I wanted to install, I don't see a way to get rid of that. So that is another issue as well. And down we get down to the bottom, they say designed for inclusivity. Again, this is, I think they've chosen the wrong word. I think they meant accessibility. They say we sat down this summer with self-described, fully blind cybersecurity enthusiast Florin Bagiers to evaluate our experience for blind folks and identify areas of improvement. On particular showstopper we noticed was the keyboard navigation and screen recorder during onboarding, which has now completely been rewritten. So again, there is a radical difference between the words inclusivity and accessibility. And I do have some experience in this field. I do have a friend who is a college professor who does a lot of work in accessibility. In fact, I've talked about it before in the live streams where I've actually helped him print the astronomy books for the blind. I've used the tactile press machines and things like that. I actually just had breakfast a month ago with a person in this field who evaluates websites and operating systems for it. He says that Mac right now is currently the most accessible, but the word is accessible, not inclusivity, which mean completely different terms. But you'll see that everything here deals with accessing it for the blind and things like that. So that's why I say that that is done. As far as the other items is their main quick settings panel is improved, and a lot of really good improvements. Very clearly able to see the screen reader, on-screen keyboard, rotation lock, dark modes, and changing the fonts, and all the other settings are in there as well. So you have a lot of really good features in there as well. So is Elementary OS absolutely horrible? Absolutely not. I just wish I get it installed so I could evaluate. In fact, if I could get it installed on a system, I might send it to my friend who does accessibility stuff and ask his opinion about it, because that's what I had said. Ubuntu has made a lot of positive direction into accessibility. I asked him to have another look at Ubuntu, and maybe eventually I will get him a copy of it to have a look at. So there is what we see. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to show you a couple of these features inside of the virtual machine. So let's move on over there next. So here is our login screen, and this is where we choose our secure or our classic session. Note that the default is still classic, so they are defaulting to X. Come up here for your secure session, enter my super secret password. That's definitely not 123. Up here is where we can see our settings. Let's go ahead and have a look at that once we log in, because there's a few more options. Let's go ahead and get logged in here. And here we are by default. You'll notice here a system security update is available. If you click this notification, it will boot up the system security items, and you'll see that there's 11 updates available. Click to learn more, and it shows you which updates those happen to be. We can toggle the automatic updates on or off. Note that when you update the computer, it's going to download all the updates and will require you to reboot the system in order to update. This is just hardware information, and then our firmware and driver updates are going to be over here. So again, I really like this isolation. The challenge we have is that the Software Center also reports a system update, but doesn't provide a way to actually update it. That's kind of a problem. All right, here is your options. We have a dark mode and a light mode toggle right here. We have an on-screen keyboard, which apparently is not working. We have a screen reader here. I'm not going to dare touch that. And then, of course, we're going to change our font sizes here on our system. Whoa, that's really small. Put it back to what it was. Then here is our, I believe this is our suspend. You'll notice the screen for that shows up way over there on the other side. So those tooltips should be closer to my mouse. There's your log out. There's your shutdown. And, of course, we have our system settings. We'll pull up here as well. The system settings is the same as it has been in the past. We're not going to spend any significant time covering it. Of course, this is where you make your changes to your docks and your panels. What I'm noticing here on the secure session is I have these, it looks like image placeholders. So it looks like permissions is not properly set or something. On Wayland, or excuse me, on the X session, those look a lot better, just like square box. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and change the size of it, make it a little bit better for me. Here's your multitasking options. And the other thing to look at is under the applications. This is, again, very similar to what you would find inside of a inside of your phone application. So you pull out an individual app and you can see all the permissions it has. Why a calculator needs GPU acceleration is beyond me, but hey, at least it's the option, right? So this is where we have, one thing I noticed is that this has system folders, including everyone's home folders, but not including system internals. But we also have a separate one for just the home folder of this particular user. The default goes down to that. And then this is where I had, if I pull up LibreOffice, let me just pull up Writer here, and I didn't see the home folder's permissions were granted. And so what I did is I created and saved a document, and it worked. Of course, the downside is the system, there it goes. This is what your permission system looks like. Background activity, LibreOffice is running in the background without appropriate permission. Let's go ahead and hit forbid. The application just dies. So there you have it. So that's maybe the downside of this. The other interesting thing I found is despite having that it did not actually set the default application for this. It tried to open this up in the File Explorer the first time. Of course, I disabled the application because I thought it was doing something bad, so now it won't let LibreOffice run. So there you go. Let's recover the selected document. And it dies again. You see, this is what the Zorin post guys are talking about. Kind of breaks the user experience, doesn't it? Let's see if I can get into LibreOffice and turn that on. There's network, Bluetooth devices, printing. So I don't even know how to reset that permission. Oh, it's up here, background activity. So I'd have to toggle that one to background activity. Now I should be able to run LibreOffice. Let's give that a try. Yeah, let's go ahead and just discard that. So now when I pull this up, it should work just fine. There you go. Because we have allowed that permission so that now LibreOffice will run. So let's not save the document. Now, of course, my LibreOffice launcher perpetually stays in the dock. I don't have a way to, I guess I can just do that and turn off the keep it in the dock. But there is the permissions and how the secure session works. So that's actually pretty good. If you want to keep something from running in the background, you can always go into your settings and do that. This is the other issue I was telling you about. You'll notice over here there's an update here. And so it's checking for updates. Now, if I had no app updates, then this system here would tell me there's no app updates, but there is still that icon that says there's an update. So because there is a system update. So there seems to be an issue there. This one here, you'll notice that this is a runtime update. So these are, this is a runtime update. If I hit the update, it will error out on me. And the challenge with this is that you'll see that it failed to update the runtime. Why? Because it was caused by side-loaded or manually complied software, third-party software source, or a package manager error. Manually refresh the updates may resolve the issue. So if I try and repair, it fails out the same way. And that was kind of the issue. So it does say manually look at that. So let's do a sudo apt update and let's see what we have. Now, what that's being caused by is that was a dependency that was added by Zoom. I attempted to, well, I did successfully. Let's see. Did I spell that right? Yes, I did. Okay. So AppStream data. I actually think everything there is in the system updates. 11 packages. So apparently installing any third-party application, like in this case, I installed Zoom. Apparently doing that will not fix the application. I might be doomed forever to have a notice about an unupgradable application inside of there if you sideload an application, which there was, again, no way to do that in the GUI. I had to do that using either dpackage, or in this case, I did it using apt. So if you do this, there's no way to use it. So I'd have to install any application like a .deb application through a terminal. So there is our brief look. Overall, my experience, Elementary OS 8, I'm just going to simply give it a pass, mostly on the basis that I couldn't get it installed on real hardware. And if I, who have the accessibility and resources, multiple drives, multiple computers, can't get a successful install of this running when I have successfully installed hundreds and hundreds of distributions, well, that's kind of a hard pass for me. I was able to get it to run just fine on the virtual machines. Gnome Boxes works. VirtualBox, does not work super well. But all that being said, the system itself, the permission system, is moving in a positive direction. I like that they've gotten rid of the nonsense warnings about installing a potentially dangerous application when I'm installing GIMP and LibreOffice, but they didn't take advantage of the new FlatHub metadata to talk about unverified applications in a very simple manner or an easy to see manner. Ultimately, they're moving in some decent directions as far as the application security, and it's kind of neat to be able to see Linux applications pulling in similar security models we're getting onto phones. That's actually really good, but the problem is, as the Zorn developers have said, Wayland is just breaking the user experience a little too much in some cases, and the failure to get this installed on real hardware are, for me, the big hang-ups with the distribution. Let me know your thoughts and experience. Is it just my hardware? Is it the computer? Is it something else? Do I need to try and rip the hard drive out of the Intel Core i5 processor, install it over there? Is that going to work? Do I need to get rid of this and upgrade my hardware to something brand spanking new to get this installed? I don't know. Let me know your installation specifically experiences in the comments down below. Once again, if you like this type of content, leave me a like and a comment down below. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. With that, thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.